Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Business Continuity for your business running in Azure session. I'm Vishal Maritra, Good Program Manager for Azure Site Recovery and Azure Migrate. And I have with me Vijay Tandla, Principal PM Manager from Azure Backup. So in today's world, every business is a digital business. And the impact of outage anytime you have is severe. The outage could be because of a natural disaster like hurricane we have experienced here few weeks back, or the outage could be because of a software failure or hardware failure or a simple human errors, because thankfully we do not see so many natural disasters, but we do observe a lot of application outages because of software, hardware, or human errors. And the impact of each of these outages are severe for your business. It could be a loss in revenue when your business apps are not running, or much wider impact on the brand of your business. And lastly, as IT, you are responsible to run your business 24/7, so it can have impact on your career too. Now, to run your business 24/7 in this digital transformation world, business continuity space provides you a set of technologies, starting from high availability, disaster recovery, and backup. High availability technologies enables application availability for infrastructure failures, failures in your compute, failures in your storage, and so on. Disaster recovery technologies enables application availability in the case of your whole primary site is down, while backup enables data availability for the cases like data corruption or data loss. The most important point is you need all three of them, because a high availability technology does not protect you from the failures where your full site is down. Similarly, a disaster recovery technology does not protect you from data corruption. You need backup. Now, the good news is that Azure is first public cloud which provides you the full spectrum of application availability technologies. Starting from a single VM, you can get an SLA of 99.9% if you're using premium storage. You can extend that SLA to 99.95 if you're using availability set. Last week, we announced availability zones. Availability zones are basically a set of fault-isolated locations within an Azure region which have redundant power supply, cooling, and networking. And it allows you to run your mission critical workloads in a high availability scenarios and protect you from data center failures. Azure also enables you to meet your compliance need by enabling disaster recovery from one Azure region to another Azure region. In today's session, we'll focus on the last scenario of meeting your compliance needs by having disaster recovery between two Azure regions, and then Vijay will come and share the backup scenarios for Azure IaaS workloads. So, today, a lot of enterprises we work with say that when they are moving to Azure and they are running their mission critical workloads, one of the common questions they hit is how do we get compliance for my DR requirement? How do I do DR failover? How can I do DR testing without depending on a public cloud to perform a real failover? To answer each of these questions, we have enabled a first-class experience where you can do disaster recovery between two Azure regions. Now, without any delay, let me show a quick demo for the same. Okay, so this is your familiar Azure portal where you can see your Azure IaaS VMs up and running. You can select a VM, and now in the VM settings, you can see a new option called disaster recovery. And enabling the disaster recovery for a VM is as simple as selecting the target region for that VM. So for example, we allow you to do DR protection for your VM to any of the Azure region in your geography. You can select any of those regions, and that's it. You can press enable protection button and that's it. There's nothing else is needed from your side to protect an Azure IaaS VM from one Azure region to another Azure region. All the heavy lifting is done by a service called Azure Site Recovery, which enables this scenario because it discovers all your infrastructure, what is the storage of the VM on the source side, what's the network of the VM, what are the subnets, what are the availability sets, and it auto creates all these resources on the target side. So for you to enable DR of a VM is as simple as selecting the VM, selecting a region, and pressing a button. Now what about a VM which we have already enabled protection for DR? So for example, let's select another VM called Contoso HRDB, which is already enabled for DR. And when you select disaster recovery for that VM, now inside your same Azure IaaS experience, you can see the health of DR. You can see the replication health is okay. You can see RPO. You're getting an amazing RPO of 28 seconds. You can see from which geo you're replicating to which geo. And from the same experience, you can perform what we call a test failover to give you DR compliance. And you can select an isolated network. One of the key capability provided by Azure Site Recovery is what we call no production impact disaster recovery. One of the major reasons a lot of customers are not confident about DR plans because they're not able to test their DR plans frequently. With this capability, when you do a test failover, what you can do is select a network, and this is an isolated network, and when you say press OK, what Azure Site Recovery does, it creates a copy of your production virtual machine on the target site in an isolated network without at all disturbing your production environment. So your production environment is up and running, serving your clients, but you have got a copy of the VM in the secondary site in an isolated network so you can perform your DR drill testing and feel confident that your DR plans are working when you need them. Okay. So to summarize, what we saw is Azure IaaS DR provides you a capability where you can set up DR between the two regions without requiring any infrastructure because we leverage existing Azure regions available across the globe. It provides you automatic protection and replication. You get best-in-class RPO and RTO of minutes. And last but not the least, it enables you to get compliance for your application by providing a capability called test failover, which creates a copy without impacting your production. So that's great. We have enabled DR for our virtual machine infrastructure with a simple click. Everything is protected. We can do test failover. Cool. The next question we hear from our customers is, what about monitoring? Because once you have enabled the DR, now you want to monitor the health of your application. And you also want to monitor the health of your failover to be confident that the day you will need DR, it will work as desired. So let me show you a quick demo how we enable the same. So this is Azure Site Recovery Vault in the same Azure portal. And as you can see that you can monitor the health of your virtual machines which are protected with Azure Site Recovery. We have a few machines here. We can see the health of majority of them is okay. 2 machines' health is critical. Now to understand what's going on with those machines, we can drill down, select the machine, and for each machine we get a very detailed drill down view is what's happening with that VM. So for example, we can find out that this machine encountered a non-clean shutdown which has caused issues with the replication and requires a resynchronization. We also have a rich eventing capabilities. So as the machine goes through different events in its life cycle, all gets recorded here. So you can see the different events this machine has gone through. And to monitor all this infrastructure, you don't need to always be available on the Azure portal. you can configure email notifications where you can configure it for the subscription admin, or you can provide your email ID. Then all these events notification will be sent to your email ID. So when there are issues, you will be notified for the same. So this is how you can monitor the health of your application, be notified if there is any issue and things like that. Now, as we talked about, the quality of your DR plan is very important, and the reliability of your DR plan is directly proportional to how often you test your DR plans. So we also have a nice view where you can see which of the virtual machines you have tested your DR plan, you have done the test failover, and which are the ones where you have never done the test failover. So you click that, it shows you the list of VMs where you have never done the test failover, so you can plan the test failover of these VMs and be confident about the DR plan for the same. Also, you can select any of these VMs and get more details. For example, when you enable ASR replication for these VMs, under compute and network property, you'll find that ASR does the best match for the VM size. So if the VM was DS3, it tries to find a VM with the exact same size in the target geo and gives you the best match. For the regions where the best match is not available, it gives you the closest best match also. So it has an intelligent algorithm to do the right compute size. At the same time, we also gives you the flexibility that at the time of failover, if you want to change the size of the VM, you can select whichever size you want. And not just the VM SKU size, you can do the same with resource group, availability set, network, etc. As we talked about, it provides a simple experience where all these resources are created automatically for you. At the same time, it also provides you a pretty powerful customizable experience also, where as a customer, if you do not want ASR to create the resource groups and availability set, you can select your own resource group, your own availability sets also. Okay. Now, with ASR, we have a simple mission to enable a single-click application DR. When we talk to our customers, they say that in the DR situation, they want a one big button where when they press, the whole application fails over from the primary site to the secondary site, and everything should just work. That's the vision with which we started ASR, and we enable that vision with a concept called recovery plan. A recovery plan is a rich orchestration concept within ASR which helps you to model your applications and provides you this one-click application failovers. Now, typically we see sort of two app patterns. Like ASR is an app agnostic technology, so it can work for any of your apps, be it SharePoint, SQL, IaaS, Dynamics, SAP, Oracle, anything. However, in terms of patterns, we see two app patterns which are used primarily in customer environments. One app pattern is something like this, where you have a non-HA SharePoint farm spread across 3 tiers. You have a AD tier, you have a SQL tier, you have a SharePoint tier spread across their different availability zones connected with load balancer. And finally, you have a public IP for the clients to access the application. This is a very typical application deployed in Azure. Now, to enable one-click application failover for this application pattern, what you can do is enable protection, as we saw earlier. And when you do that, ASR behind the scene creates all the magic. It creates a virtual network on the target side. It creates corresponding availability sets on the target sides. It creates a set of storage accounts for your data to be replicated. So at the time of failover, when you do the failover, that one-click failover on a recovery plan, again, the whole process is automated by ASR. It first shuts down your application on the source side, again, with the logic of sequencing which tier to be shut down first and so on. Second, it starts different tiers on the target side in the sequence. So for example, for your SharePoint to come up properly, you first want your AD server to be started, then your SQL server, and followed by your frontier or the SharePoint web form server. And finally, you want each of these VMs to be connected to the load balancer and a public IP to be attached so that now the clients can start accessing this failed over copy in the target region. Now let me quickly show a demo how ASR enables this one-click application failover for this app pattern. Okay, so let's go back to the ASR recovery vault. And in the vault, you have what we call recovery plans. For this SharePoint non-HA, we have a recovery plan called SharePoint non-HA recovery plan. It is protecting those 3 tiers, AD, SQL, and SharePoint. You can select, see the health of each of the tiers, which is the active location these tiers are running, like they are currently running in Southeast Asia and protected to East Asia. You can customize this recovery plan by clicking Customize. And as we talked about, that the recovery plan gives you full orchestration to bring your application with one single click of button. And the way it enables by providing a concept called groups. Groups helps you to model your dependencies within an application. For example, in this case, we wanted to make sure that the AD VM comes first, followed by the SQL VM, followed by the frontier SharePoint web tier. And once these VMs are up, we also want to make sure for the app to work, it should be connected to a load balancer and a public IP. That is the place ASR recovery plan have a rich integration with Azure Automation Service, where you can perform any automation like adding a load balancer, adding a public IP, and so on and so forth. So once you have such a recovery plan modeling your full application, enabling test failover is pretty simple. Just click test failover on your recovery plan and select an isolated network. So we have a network called non-HA VNet ASR, and that's it. So in the case of your DR compliance or in the case of real failover, failing over your full complete app is as simple as selecting your recovery plan, performing one-click big button called failover. Now when you do that, from the same ASR dashboard, you can monitor the progress of what's going on. So we can go to the jobs view, and we can see there is a test failover which is being kicked off. Now this test failover will take few minutes. So we have a test failover done for this recovery plan today morning. And as you can see that for this SharePoint non-HA recovery plan, the whole failover took less than 9 minutes. Yes, with less than 9 minutes, you are able to bring a complete SharePoint form on the recovery target. So DR is made as simple as clicking a button, and within few minutes, your whole app is up and running on the target side. Now we want to know what's happening when you click this test failover on a recovery plan. So you can see that what it does, it first makes sure that each of the VMs are failed over. Then it starts the different groups like the AD, the SQL, the web tier, and finally it uses Azure Automation to run your scripts. So the whole orchestration to bring your application is codified in this recovery plan and gives you a simple one-click application failover. Now, not just that, like you want this test failover or DR drills for your compliance needs. So we also provide you a simple gesture called export job, which exports this whole information into an Excel sheet. So it becomes a very simple for you to pass on to your compliance team that yes, for this application, you did the DR drill on this particular date, how much time it took, whether the steps were successful, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now we talked about that as a simple app pattern where you can replicate each of the tier AD, database, and web tier with ASR and get one-click application failover from ASR recovery plan. The second very common app pattern we see in Azure IaaS workload is modeled with this application, which is a SharePoint highly available form. In this form, the key difference is, unlike that application, you have a scale-out web tier, so you have 2 web tiers. Similarly, you have a scale-out app tiers, you have multiple app tiers. And the SQL is implemented with SQL always on in a highly available implementation, and you have a witness server to take care of the high availability, and then you have AD. Now, when you want to protect this kind of an app with ASR, you enable ASR replication for the web tiers and the app tiers. So ASR does all the magic of auto creation of VNet, availability sets, and so on for the web tier and app tier. You enable AD's replication with AD's own technology called AD replication, and you enable SQL replication with the app technology available inside SQL called SQL replication. So in this app pattern, we have 3 replication technologies. One is ASR's replication to replicate your web and app tiers. One is AD's replication to replicate AD. One is SQL's inbuilt replication to replicate SQL. However, ASR continues to provide you its promise of one-click failover for the complete app when you move from source side to the target side, irrespective of how many replication channels you used for modeling this modeling this application's DR. So when you do failover, ASR's recovery plan shuts down the things on the source side. Because the things are shut down, it will disconnect the AD replication and the SQL replication. Then ASR, you can use ASR automation capability to fail over the SQL. So the SQL which is running on the target side, you can promote it as primary. Then you bring up the app tiers, bring up the web tiers, and then connect the load balancers and the public IP. So then again, this complex app with one click fails over from the source side to the target side. Okay, so let's have a quick look for the same. So we go back to the ASR dashboard, recovery plans, and we have a SharePoint HA recovery plan. And when we customize it, we can see that first we start with SQL AG failover using Azure Automation Script because SQL is replicating with SQL availability group. Then we fail over the app tier, then add the load balancer, fail over the web tier, add the load balancer. So again, with one click, we are able to fail over the complete app. Now, these are about the recovery plans which are already available. So how about creating a recovery plan? Like, is it easy to create a recovery plan? Let's see it in action. So creating a recovery plan is as simple as providing a name, Ignite demo, and selecting your source. So my infrastructure is running in Southeast Asia, and I'm using Resource Manager. I can select which are the VMs which I want to participate in this ASR recovery plan. So I select my SharePoint, my SQL, and my AD, and I say OK. So creating a recovery plan is as simple as selecting which are the VMs which constitute your application. However, once you create this recovery plan, it's a very simple recovery plan. So when you go and try to customize this, you'll see that all the VMs are put in a group together. Now you can customize this recovery plan by adding multiple groups. So for example, I want to make sure my SQL fails over after my AD, so I can change the group of SQL from group 1 to group 2. Similarly, I want to make sure my web form fails over after SQL, so I can change the group to group 3, and so on. It's as simple as that. Similarly, we talked about a rich integration with Azure Automation. So post these VMs are failed over, I want to run a script, so I can add a post action called add public IP. Select my Azure Automation account and select a public IP script. It's as simple as that. That's it. You're able to create a recovery plan for your application. So for your DR drill as well as real failover, you can just press a button and the whole app will come up on the secondary site. Okay. Now we talked about rich integration with Azure automation. We also recognize that there are very standard tasks a DR situation has, like adding a public IP, adding load balancer, whether it's ILB or ELB load balancer, or adding things like NSG rules and so on. So to make the life simple for a DR admin, we also provide a set of scripts which are published in Azure Automation Gallery. So when you search for ASR in Azure Automation Gallery, you can see a set of scripts already available there. Also, to import these scripts easily in your Azure subscription, we have created an Azure template. We highly recommend you to use this template where you just click this link. It asks you a couple of questions and configure your whole Azure automation environment, import all the scripts so that adding these scripts in your recovery plan becomes really simple. So that's great. So the next question comes that with failover, with one click, I'm able to bring my app from the primary site to the secondary site. What about when the primary site is available? Can I bring the application back? And the answer is, of course, yes. And as ASR makes it very simple to move from primary site to secondary site, it's equally simple to bring the application back on the source site. So in this case, let's go to the ASR recovery vault. And we see what are the different items we are replicating. Now, for showing failback, we already have an application which is failed over from primary site to the recovery site. Like you can see payroll web. It's an application which is already failed over, and its active location is East Asia. Now, to fail back this application, you can select the VM and perform a gesture called reprotect. Because when you fail over the application, now it's no longer running on the source site, but it's running on the target site. So if you want to fail back, the first gesture is what we call reprotect. It's very similar to enabling protection when you start using ASR. The only difference is it happens from the reverse direction. Now you will be replicating data from the target site to the source site. Like as you can see here, it is going from East Asia to Southeast Asia. And you can perform OK. So it's as simple as saying reprotect from target region to the source region. And ASR replication is intelligent. It will not try to send all the data from target region to the source region. It will only find the changes which are done in the last couple of hours or days while you're running this application on the target site and fail over, replicate those changes back. So once you've done the reprotect gesture, it will take some time to send those changes and things like that. So I did that for one of my VMs called Payroll DB, where I already did the reprotect. After reprotect, to bring the VM back onto the source site, you perform the same gesture called failover, however, in the reverse direction. So in this case, when I perform the gesture of failover, you can see now the VM is currently running in East Asia, going to the Southeast Asia, and that's it. So when you perform this gesture, ASR will shut down the VM on the target side and sends the VM back to the source side. So performing a failback is a pretty simple two-step process. Select the VM in the target, perform reprotection, and then perform the failback to the original site. Okay. So to summarize, with ASR, you get no DR infrastructure. DR, you don't need to have your own site. You don't need to run any software or manage any software. It's a first-class DR service built right inside Azure IaaS service. It provides you best-in-class RPO, RTO. It provides you DR rules for meeting your compliance needs. We saw it has a very rich monitoring capabilities to monitor the health of your replication, monitor the failover health, and of course, one-click application failover with orchestrated recovery, and last but not the least, ability to fail back to the primary site. Now, one of the common questions in any DR implementation comes around networking, that when you do the DR from the primary site to the secondary site, how do you configure the network? And there are primarily two choices. Either you can retain the IP from the primary site to the secondary site, or you can change the IP on the secondary site. The good news is that with ASR, we support both the options. Like when you select the ASR VM and go to the compute and network properties, you can see we discover all the NICs. And when you select a NIC, we allows you to either change that IP on the secondary side, as well as you can provide the IP so you want to retain the IP on the secondary side. Both the options are enabled with ASR. The next common question we hear is, today my site was up and running, my SharePoint was up and running in Southeast Asia. Suddenly you move it to the East Asia. What happens to the thousands of my customers who are connected to that application, because application has suddenly moved from one source to another source? Will I have to go and send them email, tell them use some other URL and things like that? So the answer is no, you don't need to do anything like that, because we leverage a service called Azure Traffic Manager. With Azure Traffic Manager, your clients always connect to Azure Traffic Manager, which has sort of two URLs, one pointing to your source site, one pointing to your target site. So in the case of disaster, your source site URL gets degraded while your target site URL comes online, and Azure Traffic Manager does the magical routing, so none of your client even recognize that the app has moved from the primary site to the secondary site. Another common question we get is, what about on-prem connectivity? So for example, you have your workload running in one Azure region, but they are connected to your on-premise infrastructure because maybe some of your users are sitting in on-premise infrastructure, or maybe some of your other apps are sitting in on-premise infrastructure and they need to communicate. So when you replicate this application from one Azure region to another Azure region, you also need to enable the similar on-prem connectivity to the target region, which could be either using site-to-site VPN or express route, so that when you fail over your workloads from primary site to the secondary site, your on-prem is able to communicate or work with those workloads. Azure Site Recovery is available in all the geos worldwide, so you can configure ASR for your VMs running anywhere in the world. And as we shared, that it's not restricted only to the paired Azure geo. You can use any Azure geo and configure ASR. Now, one of the common questions we hear is about pricing. How do we price ASR? In a steady state, when you replicate your infrastructure, it is priced per VM per month. So you have around $25 per VM per month US pricing. You pay for the network egress cost. So all the replication which is happening from one side to other side is going over Azure Fabric network. So there is a network egress cost and the storage cost. Those are your primary steady state cost. In terms of compute, ASR provides a very simple and cost-effective solution. So in the normal state, you don't need to pay for compute. Only when you perform failover and ASR brings the VM, you pay for the compute charges only for that duration. For certain VMs which are running all the times, like AD, SQL always on, you may have compute charges throughout. In terms of where we are today, so this service is already available today as part of all the regions as public preview. You can deploy the service to protect your workloads. And yes, it works across Windows and Linux. We support almost all the big Linux distro, be it RHEL, CentOS, SUSE, Oracle Enterprise. Yes, we have Ubuntu support, and we are happy to announce Debian support today. As we talked about, ASR's primary goal is to enable app-aware DR. So we're also announcing today multi-VM consistency. There are a set of applications in the world which requires the different VMs which are part of the application to be consistent when they go from one side to other side. There are very few DR technologies in the world which provides this capability. So ASR has multi-VM consistency to help your workloads like SharePoint, which needs consistency across multiple VMs. And yes, it's available with large disk with up to 4 terabytes and the rich monitoring capability as we showed. All these capabilities are being deployed as we speak. So sometime in early October, you should be able to try these new capabilities. That's it. With this, I'll ask Vijay to help us cover the Azure backup.
Okay, folks, good afternoon. Can you hear me okay? All right, cool. So let me get started. So thanks, Vishal, for the great demo on the ASR technology for DR. Vishal gave a great context on the relevance of backup and DR in the context of Azure. But now I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about how it is actually different. Like, for example, Azure Backup is different in the context of backup when you compare that with other clouds, maybe Amazon or the other clouds. So let me spend some time talking about that. So when an organization is looking at backup or disaster recovery, bringing that into their organization, one of the first scenarios they think about using cloud is to use cloud as a storage target. Right? The backup software still is running on premises, sending data to cloud, and the data backup is pretty symmetric as to how you do tape backup to an offsite location, right? But in case of Azure, we also support that capability where you can send the data from on-premises to cloud, just like how you do it with any other cloud, right? So that's a very common traditional way of using backup, cloud as a backup target. The second use case that we see with a lot of customers is they're moving their workloads from on-premises to Azure to run their lift and shift applications, like maybe running IaaS VMs, maybe running some workloads like SQL Server, or MySQL, or those kind of workloads running in Azure, right? And then they are looking for a backup solution for making sure that they are able to cover their data loss scenarios or their data outage scenarios, ransomware attacks. So they need a solution to back up their workloads in the cloud. Again, a lot of clouds out there support what you call as install your workload backup solution as just like how you do it on premises, running them in the cloud, and have a very symmetric experience whether you're running backup on premises or running your backup in the cloud, right? It's very symmetric. But here's the catch with the traditional backup approach. First of all, when you think about backup as the cloud is just a storage target for your backup, the first thing is you need to manage all of the storage in your cloud, right? You need to provision your storage. You need to make sure you create your storage accounts. If you run out of your storage capacity, you need to create another storage account. So those are some of the challenges that a customer needs to go through if they just look at cloud as just another storage target. The second problem is with the business intelligence or the backup software still running on premises, if your entire data center went down, right, and if you don't have access to your backup software, there's just no way you can recover the data from the cloud. You need to re-instantiate your backup solution wherever you want before you can pull your first byte of data down to the on-premises environment. Then if you think about running your workload in the cloud and have your backup solution running in the cloud, again, while it might be symmetric and be very consistent with how you do your business on premises, it has a lot of scale challenges. For instance, if you're running your backup solution in an IaaS VM, again, the IaaS VM has certain limitations. There are a certain number of disks that you can attach to an IaaS VM. It does not scale if you think about bringing in more workloads to Azure and trying to back up all of these things within Azure. So let me show you how Azure Backup sort of addresses this common problems when you think about running your workload in the cloud or using Azure as a target for your storage. So first thing, I want to say that Azure Backup and site recovery included are PaaS services. These are active multi-tenanted services. The reason that I emphasize on active and multi-tenanted, let me just talk about that for a minute. Why does multi-tenanted matter to you? So if you think about your organization, you may have a bunch of applications. You may have your virtual machines. You may have your Azure files. You may have your databases running in Azure. As an organization, you are focused on making sure they are running in the best possible quality of service. You want to make sure you have the right resources running for your workloads. You want to make sure that if you have to scale your workloads, you can increase your capacity of your compute instances. If you want to increase your storage capacity, you can do that. While you do that, we take care of that. Not just that. If you want to increase your number of application instances, you want to have scale out. you can always do that. But while you're taking care of your application's scale requirements, we take care of scaling our services according to your needs. So just like you think about scaling your application up or down, we think about scaling the backup infrastructure not just for one customer, for n customers in the Azure backup service, right? So that's why a multi-tenanted service is very, very critical when you think about deploying your backup infrastructure in the cloud. Number two, I mentioned active. Why does active matter? The reason active matters is because even if your production workloads are down, your subscriptions are not available, you don't have access to your primary data, you still can walk up to the Azure Recovery Services Vault and be able to retrieve the data that you've backed up to the vault, right? So it's an active entity, it preserves the data, and it's sitting in a separate fault domain and a security domain which does not get impacted by the loss of data in your primary domain. So this is a very critical value proposition when you think about Azure backup and site recovery. So what does that mean? I mean, the value prop is pretty clear. There's no infrastructure that you need to manage for your backup, backup use case. Second thing, we recognize that while this is all great, it still has to work in an enterprise quality with enterprise scale and be able to manage all of this, in a scalable fashion. So I'll tell you, like, even 50% of our resources are spent in making sure the service is reliable, performant, and secure, while you worry about, scaling your applications, running them with the best performance and optimization. Last but not least, we also look at extensibility, right? So the first thing we did is build this multi-tenanted service that enables us to back up VMs, but down through, as I go through the demos, I'll also show you how we're able to extend that, not just for VMs, but for other workloads as we go forward. So with all of this put together, what it really helps you do is get the freedom from infrastructure and then realize the economics of cloud, because you're not paying for the, for the backup infrastructure, your VMs that are running your backup software. And given that we have the scalability of the past multi-tenanted service, we can scale up or down our service depending on what the customers are needing, right? And last but not least, as a customer, you're always paying just what you need, and we take care of scaling the storage or the compute resources according to your needs, right? So this is what sort of the Azure Backup Platform provides end to end. Okay. That said, I think I also want to point out that there's an important, subtle element that comes up when you think about, this sort of transformation, right? The deployment model for, backup infrastructure has completely changed, as you see in this presentation. But not only that, it's also some good news for the, the persona in the organizations. For instance, if you think about the application admin, in the traditional way, they had to wait for the infrastructure admin to give them the restore. If they have a requirement to restore data, if they have lost their data, they have to wait, create a ticket, wait for the infrastructure admin to give us the data back. But in case of Azure Backup, you do not have to do that because it's all self-service, and we have the ability for the application admin to go and do his own restore. That's number one. Then if you think about the infrastructure admin, now he does not have to worry about managing storage, managing network, and managing his compute infrastructure. Instead, he can focus on things like governance, billing, making sure that the organization is compliant with respect to your backup and DR requirements. So that's an important sort of elevation of the role of both the application admin as well as the infrastructure admin. So let me show you how all of this works in action. Let me just jump into a demo here. Okay. Just going to duplicate. Okay, there you go. So how many of you all already using IaaS VM backup in the audience? Okay, so one person. So the IaaS VM backup, I'm just going to show you a few demo points to kind of illustrate how you can enable IaaS VM backup. So here you have a create VM experience, and in the create VM experience, as you can see, you can just pick the settings for your VM. You pick the size for your virtual machine. And then if you go into the settings for your virtual machine, now you see that you can, right there, you can enable backup for your virtual machines. And all you need to do is specify the vault in which you want to back up your virtual machines. This vault is a container which contains all the backups that you want to send them. And this is a separate storage account. As I said, it's isolated from the production storage in a different sort of stamp. And then, most importantly, you can actually specify your backup policy, which is how frequently you want to back up your virtual machine and how long you want to retain your data. So, for instance, I can create a policy and say I want to keep it for long-term retention, and then I can pick how long I want to retain this. For instance, here I have retention up to 10 years configured in my policy. And then I can close this. I'll just discard this particular change. I'll just use the default policy, and then I can click OK. And so right there, right from the VM create experience, I can enable VM backup. Okay, there you go. And say I can say purchase. But if I want to go take a look at my vault, here I have my vault, and in this vault I have like my items, backup items. I can look at the the virtual machines in my vault, and I can actually manage all of these virtual machines from a single place. So then let me just jump into the presentation. Just one second. So you may be wondering, how does this all work in the Linux environment? So I talked about enabling VM backup. In case of Windows virtual machines, what we do is use the VSS infrastructure to quiesce the workloads before the VM snapshots are taken. So that way, the data is not only consistent across the disks attached to your virtual machine, but also making sure that the workload that is running inside the virtual machine is quiesced, and the recovery is application consistent. In case of Linux, there is no concept of VSS, or the volume shadow services in Windows. So what we have introduced is the capability to script your application quiesce logic. For instance, you can specify what's your pre-script and your post-script before we take the VM snapshots. And what this enables is to take care of flushing any writes that are dirty to the disk, or if you have a MySQL database, you can actually take the dump of all your database logs, put them in a share, and then we can take a VM snapshot. That way, the database is consistent, and I can recover the whole database in sort of with an easy with a few clicks. So what this means is obviously it's application consistent. So in the earlier models, we were only doing file system consistent snapshots, which would involve the VSS freeze. But now we can not only involve the VSS freeze, the FS freeze, but also the application logic to do the quiesce of the workloads. And it's important to also note that since this is an open platform, any application vendor or the administrator can configure the pre and post scripts as part of their VM backup setup. So let me switch to the demo here. So here I have a Linux virtual machine. I have installed MySQL on it. And if I show the list of databases, and here I have a database called Ignite VJ Test, and let me just browse to that. And I show the tables. And here I don't have any tables as part of this database because maybe I've deleted those databases, I mean those tables in the databases, or maybe I don't have them to begin with. So I can come out of this MySQL console and just show you how to enable application consistent backup. So here I have a JSON file which is like created in a well-known location inside the virtual machine, and here I can specify what my pre and post scripts are, so that before I take the VM snapshot, these scripts are invoked to make sure that the application is consistent. Okay, so let me jump to that folder there where my pre and post scripts are created. So here you see, here I have, this is a script that one of our partners built for us. It's called Capside, who actually deals with MySQL databases. And this is a script that they had published in their sort of resources. And we've taken that and sort of customized it a little bit. So that just demonstrates how others in the community can actually contribute their own scripts and build, ways to, build an application consistent snapshots. So here I have a MySQL database, and depending on the state of the VM, whether it's a master VM or a slave VM in a MySQL environment, I take the necessary dumps, and then before the and as soon as the database dumps are taken, then I can take the VM snapshots. So here I can go back to my portal, and you see that my virtual machine is already backed up. It has 3 backup items, and if I go to the virtual machine, I see those virtual machines are backed up. And if I open the recovery points, the recovery points show me that these are all application consistent recovery points. But let's say I'm a user who's not using the browser. I'm very comfortable with CLI. I want to manage and control all of these backup operations through CLI. I can just jump into the MySQL, the Linux console, and I can do a help on my AZ backup. This is a new capability we just introduced. Here we have all the commands necessary to not only just manage your backup infrastructure, but also to set your policies, view your jobs, look at the restore operations, all of that in the AZ backup command line operations. So here I just want to see what vaults are created. So I have a bunch of vaults created as part of this subscription. So now I just want to look at the recovery points for that particular VM. So let me go up. Okay. So these are the recovery points that I have created for this virtual machine, MySQL Server 4. And let's say I want to restore, I can restore, two kinds of restore. Either I can restore the entire virtual machine, which may take several hours depending on the size of the virtual machine, or I can pick a specific file from the the VM and restore that. And how do I do that? Let me just show that. Okay. Yeah. Okay, there you go. So this is the command to perform the restore. So I type AZ backup, restore files, and instead of restoring the entire virtual machine, I say I want to restore just the files. And the way I'm going to do it is mount the recovery point as an iSCSI target, and then I'm going to browse for the files within the recovery point, and then just pick the file that I need. So here I'm going to pick the recovery point that was created, let's say on the 23rd. So what this does is actually creates an iSCSI target in the cloud, which is now available for the client to connect back and then browse the files as part of the recovery process. It just takes maybe a couple of seconds. Now I'm just going to run the script, and what the script does is connect to the iSCSI target that was created in the cloud. And I need to type the password. The password makes sure that it's the right person. The person who initiated the iSCSI target is the same person who's connecting back to the target service. Now that the volumes are all initiated, I can quit, and then I can just go to the mount point. So this is the mount point that has been created for me, and I can browse to the So here you see all the files that have been backed up. The MySQL dumps have all been captured as part of the mount point. Now all I can do is just go back to my the home folder and just copy this MySQL file. Once I've copied the file, I can just use the MySQL restore command. So I'm going to specify the database that I want to restore this to. So as you noticed earlier, I had the VJ test 1, which did not have the table created. So it would be this one right here. And if I go to the MySQL command line and do use ignite test 1 and show tables. There you go. So I have restored the file, and I'm able to recover just the database that I want from the database back from the VM backup, and I'm able to restore that back into my live MySQL environment without having to restore my entire virtual machine. So that deserves an applause. Okay. So now let me just jump into the So we looked at the Linux workload protection. There are a ton of capabilities that we added over the last year in terms of VM backup. Things like encrypted. I mean, I'm just not going to read through everything here, but the most important things I want to call out are capability to back up your encrypted virtual machines. Why that is important is because if you think about encryption, the Azure Disk Encryption, it is very critical that when you do a rollover of your keys, right, you're still able to, like if you do a long-term retention, let's say you want to recover a file or a database, let's say a year ago, you still want to be able to recover the VM along with the keys that were set at that point in time, right? So even if you did a key rollover, we remember what was the particular version of the key that you had at that time and be able to recover the virtual machine with that those keys. So that is very critical when you think about doing a backup of an encrypted VM. Not just that, we've added a lot of capabilities for monitoring, integration with the OMS, which is the the monitoring, the Azure monitoring service. Added capabilities to do reporting over a period of time with Power BI reports. All of these things you would actually see as part of our session, which is actually on Thursday, where you can get a lot more visibility into what's available with Azure Backup. And then let me now just jump into workload backup. So we talked about VM backup so far, But then I want to just, I also showed how to do a backup of your MySQL database in the context of my VMs, but what about SQL Server and other workloads? So here I have an application. I'm just going to open that application and see if I'm able to back this up. And this, okay, let me switch. Sorry, it's not. So here I have an application which is essentially a website, and this website has SQL Server. I also have file servers in that website, and I want to back up all of these things in just one go. So let me see how this is going to look like. Let me try to refresh this application and see where things are. Oh, what just happened here? Oh, Vishal, did you know what happened here?
Take a lot of time to restore it because that will take time for VM restore. Should I take that time to apply for a job on LinkedIn?
No, no. I think I don't know what I'm going to do. I mean, I had all the scripts and everything. I had rehearsed for the whole backup and DR session, but I just don't know what I'm going to do. But let me see if something I can do to recover this website. Maybe there's some good news, right? I talked about VM backup, but let me see if I can do a workload level backup and restore, right? So here is something very exciting I want to talk about, right? I don't need to maybe recover the entire VM, right? Just like how I showed recovering just a MySQL database. I'm happy to introduce one of the new capabilities we're adding, actually two of them. One is backing up SQL Server running in an IaaS VM. Second thing is backing up Azure files. And Azure files is important because all of your state for your application may not be just residing inside the virtual machine. There may be artifacts and data that is around the virtual machine, maybe in a PaaS service, right? So it's important that I have a backup solution that encompasses not just the virtual machines, but also the data around it. So here I have a SQL Server, and that is running in an IaaS VM. And I've been backing this up. So luckily, I don't have to worry. I don't need to panic, Vishal. So let me just do a restore. Let me open this up. And I can do a restore from right here. So the key thing here is, if I did a VM backup, right? So I need to be able to copy the entire virtual machine, which could be several gigabytes of data, back to my the production environment. Second thing, there's a problem because I may need a point-in-time restore, right? I don't have that ability with VM backup because I'm doing maybe once a day or maybe several times a week backup. I don't have the way to do a point-in-time recovery. But with SQL backup, I'm able to do the point-in-time recovery. And the key thing to note here is that all of this experience that you saw with VM backup is exactly the same thing that you see for SQL backup. So here I can just pick the database that I want to recover. I say that I want to overwrite the database because I want to get back to my website. I pick the recovery point that I want. And here I see that I can either pick the log recovery point or pick a full or differential recovery point. Let me just pick this date because I know that the backup that was taken on 23rd was actually good. Thanks to Vishal who messed up my demo since then. Okay. Let me click OK and kick off the restore process. Then let me just jump into the Azure files. So here I have Azure files. So just like how I backed up my virtual machines and my SQL Server in an IaaS VM, I can browse to my Azure storage. And here I have Azure files that are being backed up. I can click into that, go into that backup item. And then I can either perform a file recovery, which means I can restore individual images that are part of my application. Or if let's say there was a ransomware attack and my entire website was down, I can recover the entire file share back to my original location. So let me just restore the share. Again, let me pick 23rd, which seems to be a good day for me. I'll pick the restore location. Again, I can restore to the same file share or to an alternate share, but since I want to get my website back up and running, I'll just pick the original location and say restore. And this, I mean, Vishal talked about recovering ASR in 9 minutes. Let me show you how this will all happen in 2 minutes. So let's see if you can beat that. Okay, so while that's going on, I need to do a little bit of talking. So let me show you how to enable SQL backup. So it's as simple as picking the the backup item that you want. So you say add from your familiar vault, and then instead of picking the virtual machine, I can pick the SQL server in an IaaS VM. The first thing I need to do is to discover my SQL database is running in the VM, because this is, you need to go do an inquiry inside the VM to find out what databases are there. So I can start the discovery process. So I pick the virtual machines I want to discover the SQL database, and then kick off the discovery. And while the discovery process is going on, I can see if there are any virtual machines that are already having databases that are yet to be backed up. There you go, there's one database there. And then I can say configure backup. And I just pick the database that I want to back up. Let's say I had backed up this, or I had this database created sometime back. Say OK. And now if I look at the backup policies, we have hourly log backup, but I can choose, let's say I want a low RPO backup, and I want to say I want to back up these logs not just once every 2 hours, but maybe once every 15 minutes, and then retain that for like 15 days, and then just say OK, and then enable the backup, right? The same thing I can do for Azure Files as well. So if I go to the Azure Files tab right here, one sec. Okay, yeah, so here I go. So if I go to the Azure Files, I can pick the type of data source I want to back up. I say backup, and I pick the storage account where my file shares are. I drill down to the storage account, and then I can pick all the file shares that I want to back up, or just specific ones. Let's say I want just the marketing and the sales data there. And then I can pick the backup policy. Just like how you saw for the SQL Server, I can pick a backup policy. In the preview, we're actually limiting the backup policies to be 120 points, which means you can store it only for 120 days. In the GA, we're going to extend that to make it a long-term retention as well. So I can pick the existing policy and say OK, and then just enable backup. So now you see all of this data, not just VMs, Linux virtual machines, your SQL Server running in IaaS VM, your Azure files, all of this comes together in just one single place with Azure Backup. And because we built this in an extensible model, any new applications that we bring in, either Azure PaaS services or any workloads, can actually bring up all of them together. Now let me see if my workload is running. Let me do a refresh. See if this is back. Okay. Drum roll, drum roll. Oh, came back. It all happened in 2 minutes. I beat you, Vishal. Okay, cool. I will stop that. So that just proves the point. I don't need to play the whole video. For those folks who want to buy this particular Xbox One, you can just contact me offline. All right, let me switch back to the last part of my presentation. So we talked about some of the key capabilities for Azure IaaS VM, but we keep enhancing that. So if you are interested in the preview capabilities I just showed, like the SQL or Azure files, you can send a mail to the account I show in the slide here, Ask Azure Backup Team at Microsoft.com, and we'd be very happy to sign you up. These bits should be available in the next few weeks in the month of October. And I'm also happy to show some of the other capabilities, like support for backups of VMs that are part of storage ACLs, large disk. This has been a very a key ask from a lot of the enterprises. Not only that, the ability to migrate your resources from ASM model backup vaults to the ARM recovery services vault, as well as migrating your recovery services vault from one subscription or tenant to another subscription or tenant for the CSP to, so the EA to CSP migration. But we also have capabilities like system state backup, which you'll see as part of our sessions on Thursday. So with that, I'm just going to wrap up here. I hope you had these are a few things I want to just reiterate as part of my session. Number one, I think we saw both with backup and DR, we had a very compelling and a differentiated offering from Azure to do both backup and disaster recovery. The configuration was very simple and consistent, I hope. When you see those demos, I encourage all of you to go and play with the product. It's very easy. You just get an Azure subscription, create your virtual machines, and get cranking. With all these capabilities, it's important that you can show to your CTO that you're able to meet your BCDR compliance when you move your workloads to Azure. That's very important. We want customers to onboard to Azure as much as possible. Last but not least, we talked a lot about infrastructure, no infrastructure, no infrastructure, no infrastructure, multiple times. And the reason that is important is, as you think about backup and DR, we do not want you to pay for things that you don't need, right? Backup is just like it's like it's a necessary evil. So we want to make sure it cuts down your cost as you try to deploy your workloads in Azure. Make sure that backup and DR are very easy to consume and cost effective when you think about your BCDR compliance. With that, I'm just going to wrap up, and here are the other session resources. And there are a bunch of sessions happening throughout the week, starting with the Protect Your Data with Azure Backup happening on Thursday, and there are many sessions that are going on throughout the week. I encourage you to attend and enjoy the rest of your Ignite. Thank you.